Behold the splendor and marvels of the 21st century. Self-driving cars that people will do any and everything in. Weight loss medicine that sheds fat like butter in a microwave. People making millions of dollars selling subscriptions to pictures of their buttholes. Nobody can get a job despite the vast vacancies at your local Pizza Hut. AI porn of Daphne Blake from Scooby-Doo. Insane politics in every bit of media so that the despotic ideologues make modern day team sports politics inescapable. Okay, so maybe the 21st century is off to a bit of a rough start, but one thing for certain is that the tools for creatives to make their own art has never been more readily accessible. There are 3D modeling softwares like Blender, free game engines such as Unreal Engine, production quality cameras on mobile phones, studio quality microphones for less than $1,000, and fully featured video editing software that's available for free. The editor I use to make my videos, DaVinci Resolve, is used in feature films such as Jason Bourne, Deadpool 2, Alien Covenant, and even the first Avatar from James Cameron, and you can use it for free. Video's not sponsored by DaVinci Resolve. I don't know why it came out like a sponsorship. My bad. Shit. With all these tools available, it's no wonder we've seen a boom in independent media, especially from fans of established franchises. So today, I want to take a look at the world of fan films and see what is possible in the world of independent media. But before that, if you'd like to support me and check out a novel from an indie author, hit the link in the description and take a look at my sci-fi military series Blur Havoc. Or if you'd like, check out my Patreon, Subscribestar, or affiliate links. If anything, a like and subscription are enough. It would be much appreciated. Today's first film is a fan project with a pretty large YouTuber attached, Mr. Isaiah Nichols, aka Wendigoon. Wendigoon is a content creator who covers horror, true crime, and government conspiracy content. While the second writer and one of the directors, Evan Muhir, has written 2 short films before in the horror franchise of the SCP Foundation, Shadow of the Zone is Wendigoon's first writing credit. For full transparency, yes, I am a fan of Wendigoon's content and have been subscribed for a few years. That does not mean I will be going easy on him, and if you know my content, you know that going easy isn't really my style anyway. Now, what do I think of Shadow of the Zone?
I mean, it's alright, like...
I have no knowledge of the Stalker franchise or the lore. Hopefully that will change one day, as I have the first 3 games in my Steam library with 81 minutes in Shadow of Chernobyl and 0 hours in the other 2, so I can't judge this film on its accuracy to the games. What I can say is that it's a beautifully shot but ultimately thin film. The story is that we follow a freelancer stalker named Crow who was drawn into the zone after his wife was killed in an accident caused by a drunk driver. The film opens with Crow on an excursion with some mercenaries as they dispatch a group of Monolith members. Crow then gets a vision of something in the forest, and I guess everyone else saw it. I'm not too sure since the scene focuses on Crow's reaction rather than establishing that everyone is clearly seeing it. We meet the rest of the crew, and here's my first critique, which is simply the nature of these types of things. Wendigoon himself makes a cameo appearance as a mercenary. His appearance is a prime example of why you can't have YouTubers showing up in your serious fan films or games like this. All I can think about whenever I see him is the same guy who had this moment.
Painting.
If that octopus moves, I'm out, bro.
Oh my gosh! That scared the shit out of me.
I won.
That's how you know.
That was it.
It's the same thing for Markiplier, MatPat, and Jacksepticeye. More often than not, it's immersion breaking. The only YouTuber cameo I can think of that has ever actually worked was Corey Kenshin's cameo in Five Nights at Freddy's, because his cameo was genuinely funny and felt like a natural use of his personality and internet presence. We also run into another problem in this section of the film. The runtime is way too short for the amount of character work it's trying to do and the amount of lore and exposition it wants to insert. More on that second one later, but the first one is evident by how the characters are introduced, like they're being listed off on a Wikipedia article rather than actual character introductions.
Seeing as both of you are new here, this is what's left of us. Over here's Yokel, our weapons sergeant, Weaver, our medic, Batty, I don't have a clue what he does, and lastly the Joshes, our support gunners.
We know nothing about these characters besides their combat roles. The only character that gets a personality trait is Batty, whose sole characteristic is that he's fucking bonkers. They did capture something I experienced in the 81 minutes I played in the first game. While in the zone, you have no clue who you're looking at from a distance. You don't really know if they're friend or foe, and it increases the tension of the moment as you have to choose if you want to approach them or wait to let them pass, as the games are not known for letting you live out a power fantasy. You can die very quickly. The team stops and Crow sleeps? I'm confused because we get a shot of Crow laying on the ground right after the team sneak past a group of unknown contacts. He has a dream about the day his wife died, only she avoided the drunk driver and lives. When he wakes, he and the team's smart guy Brain have the first of two conversations that are gigantic exposition dumps that are on the level of Jetfire's exposition dump about the 13 Primes and Revenge of the Fallen. To paraphrase, Brain explains that there is a new sphere, a place where all of human consciousness and knowledge resides. The zone is somehow drawing those with little to live for here with things that it has pulled from them because it wants this knowledge and experience for something. And for future reference, Brain lost his daughter to a debilitating disease. It will be mildly important later. This is also when I felt like my knowledge gap in Stalker lore has hindered my viewing experience because I was beginning to ask a lot of questions. My primary one being, is life just normal outside of the zone? Do people just go to work like normal? Does anything from the zone leak out into the normal world? To be clear, I'm not expecting the film to answer all of these questions directly. Just give me enough information for me to come to the conclusion naturally. The team also lost their medic in the middle of the night. He left to take a leak, then never returned, presumably dead. Again, it's mildly important for later. The team reach a facility where they get into a gunfight with Monolith, and some of their men can take way more shots than a human should be able to take. This leads to a neat joke that only gun nuts like myself would probably appreciate.
This is exactly why I have to fucking pray away!
You can tell that the people who made this film know at least a decent amount about guns. They even got silencers right. After defeating Monolith, we get a reveal that feels like it was ripped straight from Mass Effect 3 when the team lifts the mask off a Monolith member and sees he's been mutated. From here, half of the team split up to mount a defense against the inevitable response, and the others look for intel inside. While looking for intel, Crow finds a phone that has evidence that incriminates Brain in all of this. It's revealed he's been part of this whole operation and that he's part of a group named Mercury. Then we get the second large exposition dump that's pretty hard to follow as names and concepts get thrown around with zero regard to how any of this sounds to someone who hasn't played the games. So here's what I parsed from this dump. Remember the Noosphere? So there's this project that Mercury was working on called The Hive that would remove all negative experiences and knowledge from the Noosphere, wiping away vices, addictions, and negative thoughts. At some point, the Hive went AWOL and became self-aware. It killed a bunch of people and Brain was sent here to salvage any useful info, then call in an airstrike to blow it to hell and back. However, Brain wants to keep the Hive alive because it could be a boon to humanity after what he and Crow went through. Crow losing his pregnant wife and Brain losing his daughter. Brain argues that they can make a positive change in this world since they have nothing left to live for. As the team outside defend the lab from Monolith forces, they begin to get picked off. Crow and Brain enter the Hive chamber to find that Weaver the medic is still alive, but not for long as he gets his head lobbed off by the Hive. His decapitated head is taken by the Hive, presumably to siphon the information and knowledge from it. Brain and Crow flee, but the Hive does this kind of like Enchantress from Suicide Squad thing, where it throws Crow into a dream where he lives in a world where his wife didn't die, and the man who killed her is tied up in the garage, ready for torture. Despite wanting to, Crow declines and forgives him, causing the Hive to spit him back out into reality. I'm not really sure why this was such a pivotal moment for Crow. Why is this the peak of his arc in this film? Is it because the Hive only wants negative emotions and experiences, so it rejected Crow? Why does Crow personally need this moment? He didn't spend the runtime of the film ruining the day his wife died or seeking the blood of the man who killed her, so why exactly is this moment so important for his character? Brain left a note on Crow that has the authorization phrase for the airstrike so he can call it in. How'd Brain do this if he was under the influence of the Hive? Crow calls in the airstrike and evacuates the building. Outside, Batty is taking a last stand and tackles a brute into an anomaly, and it insta-gives them both in what is easily the worst shot in the film, which doesn't say much because the film looks gorgeous otherwise. Crow and the rest of the surviving team evac as the lab is destroyed. The team regroup, and once the action dies down, they invite him to join the group permanently. Crow declines, however, stating that he needs to find his own way. Cut to credits. Yeah, Shadow of the Zone is a 6 out of 10 at best. The film is a super lightweight, by-the-books military film with some sci-fi elements here and there. The plot work is scarce and character work is too light for either of them to hold the film up on their own. The best aspect about it is the fact that it looks damn good, except for that one shot that looks like a PS3 cutscene. It's still worth a watch solely to see how the film industry doesn't have a monopoly on the surface level aspects of film. And for Wendigoon's first writing project, I'd say this is a solid first attempt. Spider-Man Lotus. God have mercy on me. So most of us are aware of the controversy behind this film's actors. However, we're not here to discuss their behavior. We're here to discuss the quality of the film. How can I best describe the pitch for Spider-Man Lotus? What this film feels like is the second film in a trilogy where the first film was a mashup of Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This film has multiple events from both films: Gwen's death from TASM 2, Norman Osborn's accidental death from Spider-Man 1, the thug who killed Uncle Ben was also the guy Peter let go after mugging the wrestling manager in Spider-Man 1, Harry went to boarding school like in TASM 2, and Captain Stacy dies shortly before Gwen does like in TASM 2. However, the events in this film's plot are kind of scarce. Like, I don't know if you were expecting me to take an absolute dump on this movie, but it's not the absolute worst thing I've ever seen. It's just a wildly drawn out film that has a few good scenes that do genuinely work. Essentially, this film is about how Peter Parker's friend circle, Harry Osborn, Mary Jane Watson, himself, and his girlfriend Gwen Stacy, fell apart after Gwen's death at the hands of the Green Goblin, Spider-Man's nemesis and Harry's father, Norman Osborn. Since this film is rather light on plot, I'd rather focus on the characters. After a brief action scene that's pretty decent by fan film standards, the film starts proper with Peter remembering the night he backed out from proposing to Gwen at her tombstone, regretting his reluctance. MJ comes by to try and get Peter to go out to a party to relax a little and get his mind off of things, but Peter completely rips MJ to shreds, calling her out for basically being an inconsiderate attention whore who can't stand the limelight not being on her at all times. Which doesn't really make sense in this film because out of all the characters in this movie, MJ kind of gets the least characterization. She only really has two traits in this film. She wants to be a movie star and she loves her friends. We don't get a scene of her actually exhibiting any of the things Peter accuses her of doing. Even when we get the scene of her conversation with Flash Thompson at the party later, she's not even having fun. She's outside smoking a cigarette and crying about her friends and their well-being. Because of these things, it feels like the writer despises MJ and sees Peter and Gwen as the one true pairing. And to highlight my next point, we're going to jump ahead a little bit to the next scene where Peter returns to his apartment to find Harry, who had gone missing since his father's death, slumped on the couch completely knocked out from some pills. Peter confronts him and tries to play the same "you're inconsiderate" card on Harry that he played on MJ, but Harry hits him with the trap card called "my dad just fucking died," showing us that Peter is actually the inconsiderate one. This scene really highlights how much of a mess Peter is in this movie. He keeps burning bridges with everyone because a supervillain killed his girlfriend, an occupational hazard of being a hero in general, not just a superhero. Yeah, it sucks, but the world doesn't stop and focus on you and your shitty day. And when we get to talking about Harry, it makes Peter look really whiny. Back at that scene in the graveyard, MJ gave Peter a note from a terminally ill kid named Tim, talking about how Spider-Man is his hero. After Peter cries about Gwen for the second time in 20 minutes in the runtime, Peter goes to visit the kid as Spider-Man. Before we get to that scene, I have to mention that this movie is so fucking melodramatic. There are 2 montages of people crying and moping about past friendships and bygone lovers. You don't get to do that twice at the beginning of the movie. We don't know these characters like that. You need to sell us on why these characters are worth crying over. And with Gwen, she's never really shown to be more than a cute girl who's Peter's girlfriend and is supportive of MJ's acting career. Peter meets the Make-A-Wish kid Tim and finds out that he is probably Spider-Man's biggest fan. He wallows in self-pity again and asks why the kid wouldn't be a fan of someone like Captain America or Thor. When talking about his origin, he paints the events in the worst possible light, then tells the kid that he should find a new superhero because Spider-Man sucks actually. Then he takes the door to leave for the sole purpose of bumping into Tim's mom on the way out, where his mom tells Spider-Man to stop being a little bitch because people look up to him and they don't see him the same way he sees himself. So Spider-Man goes back upstairs and spends some time with the kid. The last scene with the kid is genuinely a pretty good scene where the kid tells Spider-Man he's scared, seemingly knowing that his life is coming to an end. Spider-Man tells him that he's braver than he is for facing it. Before he leaves, he reveals to the kid that he is Peter Parker. For some reason, the kid recognizes him. I don't get why he would recognize some random photographer, but whatever, sure, I guess. Checking in on Harry, he's moping around the city to dreary music as a shot alludes to the idea that he might be thinking about suicide. That's a common complaint I've heard with this movie. The film is quite dark and bleak, and I don't disagree with this. There are certain things you have to do to keep your audience engaged during a darker story. You can't have a story be 100% bleak and dark 100% of the time. There's a trope called "too bleak, stopped caring," where the audience begins to disconnect when there's nothing worth investing in because everything is so awful for the characters and everyone is miserable. In some of my personal work, I was very concerned with this trope and being too melodramatic, especially in my 3rd full-length novel. I wanted the 3rd book to be quite dark, but I didn't want the whole thing to feel desolate and hopeless. And this is where I'm going to reveal something that may seem counterproductive. You need to have a little bit of comedy or levity in your dark story. This was something I kept in mind for the development of my trilogy of novels. I ramped up the humor in Blur Havoc 2 so the darker nature of Blur Havoc 3 figuratively attacks the reader. And in Blur Havoc 3, I used comedy as a bit of a pressure release valve, a few moments to let the audience breathe after reading about named characters experiencing hell on earth. Now, one series that gets labeled as humorless is the Snyderverse. Even critics said it was humorless, but that wasn't really true. Spider-Man Lotus, on the other hand, is almost literally humorless. Outside of Spider-Man's quips in the intro fight, I can't remember a single joke in this movie, even between Gwen and Peter when they're supposed to have some chemistry. You know, the one thing TASM 2 absolutely nailed. Jumping back to Harry, he eventually ends up at his father's grave where he remembers how harshly his father treated him, calling him a failure and constantly belittling him. MJ finds him and they have a conversation that led me to the realization that Harry is the best character in this film due to one single line.
You wanna know why I was at that cemetery? Because I had nowhere else to go. Not after Tad, not after Gwen. You know, Pete was gonna propose to her. He had a ring and everything. I was there with him when he got it. I helped him as much as I could.
Harry was told he was a failure all of his life because he never met his father's standards. Harry alludes to those things being endeavors he had no real interest in, but only did them to get his father's approval. But the one time he wanted to succeed, when he set up chances for Peter to propose to Gwen, it ended up in failure. Before you say anything about this, understand that having a hand in your friend's proposal, either wittingly or unwittingly, is an indescribable feeling. Hearing your friend mention you in the proposal speech is something you don't realize you'd feel proud about until it actually happens. I was mentioned in my friend's speech and it brought a tear to my eye. Knowing that you played a part in 2 people finding lifelong love is something special and cannot be discounted. MJ recounts a story about how Harry created some of the most memorable moments in their friendship. When they were in the rain waiting for fireworks, and Harry was the only one who was optimistic about the fireworks show starting despite the weather. This car scene was easily the best scene in the movie because of how it explores Harry's relationship with his father and how that bleeds into his social life. Previously, MJ had a scene with Flash Thompson at a party where Flash shares a private situation he was dealing with and how Peter and Aunt May were there to help him despite Flash bullying him. He shares this to show how Peter is not a horrible guy, he's just hurt, which feels more like justification for Pete being allowed to verbally execute MJ just because he's sad. This is also the scene where MJ finds out that Harry was back in town, and that leads to the aforementioned car scene. These scenes establish the roles of each character in the friend circle. Harry is usually the Pollyanna, the optimist, but the death of his father and Gwen in such a short amount of time tore him apart. MJ is the empath, the person who listens and absorbs the emotions of her friends. But this kind of behavior can be rough on someone who is trying to help others who are grieving. And Peter is the soldier, the one who is trying to do it all and support everyone despite not physically being able to do so. When life came crashing down on him, for lack of a better term, he started crashing out himself because no one was able to support him in the way he supports others. It's quite an interesting dynamic once you analyze it a bit. But the problem here is that I have spoken very little about one character. Fucking Spider-Man. What kind of Spider-Man movie has Spider-Man in it for a little under a quarter of the overly long runtime? I'll tell you what kind of film. One that is more interested in exploring Peter's interpersonal life rather than the dynamic of him juggling that personal life with his duties as Spider-Man. And that's what makes a good Spider-Man story in the first place. Peter's struggle to juggle it all. So that's what makes this movie an overall fumble. Peter already tried to juggle it all and he dropped multiple eggs, so in this film he just decides to say fuck it and drop all of them. And I speak for a lot of people when I say that's exactly what makes this movie so boring. There aren't really any stakes because the stakes have already been dealt with before the film even starts. Everyone's lives suck. Spider-Man has quit, the girl is dead, and everyone thinks Spider-Man did it. So what's the point of this story? Well, it's to put everything back to the status quo. That's what the point is. By the end of the film, Spider-Man has returned and everyone's friends again. So now what? Where do you go from here? Like, does Harry know his father killed one of his close friends? At the risk of sounding pretentious, I have to ask, where is the drama? To sum up my thoughts on this film, I think Spider-Man Lotus, in spite of the controversy, is an overhated film. It's not amazing or even good, but it's not some vile beast that needs slaying. It's an acceptable first try at a feature-length film. But it's clear that the writers either lacked the skill or the interest to tell a Spider-Man story. And based on the few fight scenes in this film, I do not think they lacked the skill. Overall, I'll rate this film by sharing what I said about it on Twitter. Spider-Man Lotus is like the first time you get a whipping from your parents and you realize that shit doesn't hurt anymore. You expected something gut-wrenchingly painful, but only experienced a slight sting. Yeah, Lotus is bad, but it ain't that bad. Alright, so we've already got a nearly 3-hour long video I just made on Shadow the Hedgehog, so I'm going to be rather brief with this part of the video so that I don't shadow you guys out. Project Shadow is a short fan film made by Brazilian director and writer, okay, hold on, let me not mess this up, João Felipe Santiago. It's a little under 30 minutes and it was made after the reveal in the post-credit scene of Sonic 2 that Shadow was going to be in the third film. At least I think so? If he made this in 2022 and had it out by 2023, that's some damn impressive work. To save you some time, Project Shadow is literally a lore-accurate live-action adaptation of Shadow's backstory from Sonic Adventure 2. Only it's in Portuguese. Yeah, the film was originally made in Joao's native language and then dubbed into English. It's not an error that the lip sync does not match.
I don't know, but I would be very happy just to be able to live there.
Não sei, mas eu ficaria realizada só em poder morar lá.
Since you already know how I feel about Adventure 2, I don't really need to go into whether I think the story is good or not. I'd like to highlight how amazing it is that a fan film managed to not only make a CGI animated character with good animation, not only did they make whole CGI environments, not only did they integrate live action actors into a CGI environment and it usually works more than it doesn't, but they did all of this with only 3 CGI animators: Kevin Herwing, Cameron Pickert, and Joao himself. For those that wanted a more accurate live-action Shadow the Hedgehog backstory, this will scratch that itch. I'm sure once Sonic 3 comes out on digital, someone will make a lore-accurate cut that inserts some of the scenes from this fan film into the actual film and make it one seamless story. I'm quite interested to see what the final result would look like. Now that we've seen what a 3D animated fan film could look like, what exactly do you think would happen if someone tried to make a full feature-length film that is also connected to a long-running franchise? You might want to sit down for this one, pal. Now, the climax of this video. Let's cut the bullshit. This fan film is bad. Really fucking bad. It's not even really so bad it's good. It's a painfully abhorrent film that gets literally nothing right. Before I get started, I want to address something. If you're familiar with this film, you know that there's a boatload of drama surrounding the production of this film, ranging from a near decade-long production, crowdfunding woes, and how do I put this? A voice actor for Optimus Prime who made the guys from Spider-Man Lotus look like Jehovah's Witnesses. Despite all of that, I must reiterate, I don't want to delve into any of that as there are plenty of videos that focus on the production troubles surrounding this film. I solely want to focus on the final result, which could possibly take a long time. I think this section is about 50% of the video. So the story starts after the events of the TV show Transformers Prime, specifically the events of the series' film finale named Predacons Rising. To sum up what you need to know about that film, Unicron, the dark god of evil, possesses the corpse of Megatron on Earth and heads towards Cybertron to destroy it. It's not explicitly stated in the film, at least I don't think so, but Cybertron is Primus, the god of all Cybertronians.
To destroy the spark of his archenemy, Primus.
But that's the core of our planet.
Which explains why Unicron wants to destroy it. Meanwhile, Optimus Prime is in search of the Allspark, which can be used to kickstart the core of Cybertron and revive his people. A bunch of things happen that aren't really necessary for you to know for the context of this fan film, but at the end, Optimus tricks Unicron by absorbing the energy of the Allspark and sucking up Unicron's spark out of Megatron, freeing him. Once Megatron is freed, he is reborn but no longer has the taste for conquest. After being oppressed himself, he no longer wishes to inflict that pain onto others. He flies away and exiles himself after disbanding the Decepticons. But because Optimus absorbed the energy of the Allspark, he must now sacrifice himself to restart the core of Cybertron and save his people. So he dies, new sparks are released from the core, and the Cybertronian race is reborn. The end. Also, the Decepticon knockout joins the Autobot. Overall, I like the bow Predacons Rising ties on the TF Prime storyline, especially Megatron's heel-face turn after getting a taste of his own medicine. If you've seen Galvatron's Revenge, you already know how I feel about this movie. I'm gonna try my best to recall what happens in this movie because I can't find a full synopsis and I'm not watching this shit a second time. Before the film even starts, we get 2 title cards. Oh god. Based on what I've read, Galvatron's Revenge begins 5 years after the ending of Predacons Rising. We open to a battle between 2 new, to the Prime continuity, Autobots named Rodimus and Springer, and a brand new, again, to the Prime continuity, team of Decepticons called the Combaticons, led by Onslaught. The first conversation between 2 characters is 100% exposition that both of them should know already.
Remind me again how we got here?
The hyperdrive was damaged, and this abandoned factory was the closest place I could find to land for repairs. It was either land and fix the ship, or the Decepticons scrap us in space.
It isn't apparent quite yet until later, but the fights in this movie have zero momentum. You will feel like absolutely nothing is happening despite watching robots punch and shoot each other for nearly 45 minutes. If you cut down most of the fights by 50%, I really don't think this movie would be nearly 2 hours long. The Autobots use some flashbangs to escape and the Combaticons give chase. I shit you not, Onslaught commands the Combaticons to stop the Autobot ship no less than 3 times in this scene. 90% of his lines in this scene is just,
After them, you fools! Combaticons, do not let them escape! Combaticons, do not let them escape! Combaticons, I want that ship brought down now!
On the way out, the Autobots blow up the facility and knock down the Combaticons, but not before... I guess this is blast off, I've got no clue. Anyways, he shoots a tracker onto the Autobot ship. As the Combaticons give chase, the rubble on the planet below shifts to reveal that a group of new Cybertronians have arisen named Slipstream, Cyclonus, Scourge, and their leader Galvatron. We're going to learn more about them later. On Cybertron, Ratchet, Knockout, Ultra Magnus, and Bumblebee come across a potentially world-changing discovery, the Covenant of Primus. I hate how they've essentially stripped Knockout of all of his personality in order to really sell us on the idea that he's a good guy now. Knockout being self-centered and narcissistic wasn't necessarily something that couldn't have worked with him as an Autobot. Then there's a whole conversation dedicated to the color of Knockout's eyes. Basically, it's because he chose to be an Autobot and with time his spark aligned with that choice. I'll tell you right now, we didn't need this. Transformers 1 executed this idea infinitely better and didn't need a whole scene to explain what's happening. So next, Smokescreen and Ratchet are sent to... I didn't mention this, but yeah, Smokescreen is in this scene. They're sent out to find that Covenant of Primus I was talking about so they can revive Optimus, which is a direct fuck you to Predacons Rising. Then when Smokescreen asks to use the ground bridge, Ultra Magnus says that they are low on Energon and can't use it. Then what the fuck was the point of Optimus dying in Predacons Rising if he didn't revive Cybertron that allowed them to... Okay, whatever. When I tell you I ugly laughed when I realized why Smokescreen left with Ratchet instead of literally any other physically capable Autobot, I snorted out loud. You'll see what I mean soon. We go back to check up on those 4 new bots and we get a giant lore dump that I'm going to sum up here. Galvatron is the leader of the Destructicons, bots that were forged by Unicron to be bots that were forged by Unicron to be anti-primes. There were supposed to be 13 of them just like the originals that Primus made, but he was defeated before he could complete them all. The only 4 he made were Galvatron, Cyclonus, Scourge, and Slipstream, and their mission is to retrieve Unicron's spark and revive him. And in the Prime continuity, Unicron is Earth. What are the fucking chances that this random planet the Autobots and Decepticons were fighting on would house the 4 horsemen of the fucking apocalypse? And since when exactly has Unicron ever made anything? Wasn't his whole shtick that he cannot create, he can only corrupt and destroy? I mean, his name is literally the Chaos Bringer, not the Life Creator. And in the middle of this lore dump, there is an almost literal PowerPoint presentation while Galvatron explains each Destructicon's combat role, which doesn't even come into play for the majority of the film because they all fight exactly the fucking same. They punch each other and hit each other like rock'em sock'em fucking robots. But anyway, Galvatron punctuates the exposition with,
"And I am Galvatron, your leader."
Yes, he basically finishes the introductions by saying, "I'm just that guy." We check back with Rodimus and Springer and the Combaticons have caught up to them. Onslaught commands the Combaticons to destroy them so they can please Megatron. Do they know? It feels oddly G1-esque for the Combaticons to be this bumbling and out of the loop regarding something as big as their faction leader quitting. It's just waved off as, he hasn't said anything, let's just continue the mission. When they really should have asked Starscream, Shockwave, or Soundwave, "Hey yo dog, what the fuck is going on?" And why did they immediately give chase to the Autobots if they have a tracker on them? Just wait until they reach their destination, then engage them once they've stopped. Why give up the goose so soon? So all of them crash on Earth and...
Oh my goodness!
The humans, great Scott! I don't think I need to say anything else. This speaks for itself. The Autobots crash and meet with Special Agent Fowler from the show. He recognizes the Autobot emblem and has them ground bridge to the human base. Meanwhile, another group of humans track the Combaticons ship and move to meet them. Fowler calls up Ultra Magnus and he sends RC, Wheeljack, and Bulkhead. The guy playing Bulkhead isn't even trying to sound like Kevin Michael Richardson. He just sounds more like Wheeljack's voice actor than anything, while Wheeljack himself sounds more like Joe Swanson.
Ratchet's restored planets. He'll find a way to save you.
Are you kidding me? We had some of the best battles together.
That hit we took did some damage. Receiver's operational, but we can't transmit.
I'm still at my peak. Got the scars to prove it. So, who's the rookie?
Hey, Peter. I'm not sure where the models for the official robots came from, but looking at Wheeljack, Bulkhead, and RC standing in the same room as Springer and Hot Rod, it really highlights how these models were not made by the same team. Then Hot Rod flirts with RC. Oh boy, this is not the last time you're going to hear about this. Aside from that, Bulkhead describes RC as a con crusher. You're going to notice very quickly that RC gets flattered a lot in this film. Fowler gives Springer and Rodimus new alt modes so they can blend in, but the alt modes he offers Springer are sci-fi space vehicles, so what was the point? Then we get a whole ass explanation for why Springer is a triple changer. While I appreciate the desire to make the addition lore friendly, I don't really think we need a whole minute-long explanation for how Springer can change into two different alt modes. It was provided solely to explain how Springer is a triple changer and why no one else can be a triple changer. That's basically it. This kind of lore explanation could have worked in a slower, one-on-one conversation while the action has died down, a la Spider-Man No Way Home, where the Peters talk about Raimi Peters' ability to make his own webbing in his body. Here, it's just Springer giving a lecture on Cybertronian Civil War history and no one has any input. After this, the humans fight the Combaticons and get their asses handed to them. Then we bop over to Cybertron where the Destructicons arrive. Ultra Magnus commands Smokescreen to return to base while Ratchet stays and continues his work on the Covenant of Primes. Knowing that the Destructicons were inbound, I snorted when I realized what the writer did. The only reason Ratchet went on this mission, when he rarely ever does field work anymore, was for the sole purpose of keeping him out of the fight at the base because he wouldn't have stood a chance. This also keeps him in play to revive Optimus later, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The reason why this is a problem is because that would have actually created some actual tension. It would have been interesting to see how Ratchet would have survived the Destructicon attack when he is not as combat savvy and older, especially since his survival would have been necessary to revive Optimus once he had the Covenant of Primus. They snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. I actually used this technique in my first book where I have the brains of the group Ozzy get chased down by the main antagonist who defeated two of the protagonists when they double teamed him. Sometimes it's okay to put the weakest character in danger. I mean, shit, the actual show did this when Ratchet gets doped up on synthetic energon and thinks he can take Megatron, only to get his guts rearranged and put into critical condition in mere seconds. We then get a painfully long fight scene that highlights another issue with them, that contributes to that feeling of zero momentum. After trading a few blows for a few seconds, everyone stops to trash talk for a little bit before trading blows for another few seconds or cutting to a different fight. Rinse and repeat until the director decides that someone lost. That was deliberate wording for that last sentence, by the way.
Ha! Laugh while you can. You hold your position, believing you actually have a chance to defeat me.
Oh, I do. Strength alone will do you no good. Now, let's see what you're made of.
Ah, my first trophy.
Side note, Scourge whips out a sword that deadass looks like the Black Arm sword from Shadow the Hedgehog. After the overly long and really boring fight scene, Galvatron and the Destructicons find Unicron Spark in the basement of the Autobot base. Why didn't they destroy Unicron Spark? This is the equivalent of knowing that Satan is real, defeating him by trapping his soul in a water bottle, then letting that soul sit in your attic for 5 years before fucking Azazel breaks into your house to free Satan. Like, what are we doing here? If you can't destroy his spark, then at least make it harder to find than locking it in your basement. Like, look at this. Slipstream presses a button and it opens the basement, and she presses another button and it turns off the turrets. No biometrics, no vocal authorization, no retinal scans, nothing. Here's what you could have done that would have been a good character moment for Knockout. Have one of the Destructicons hold Bumblebee hostage and threaten to kill him if they don't unlock the vault. Bumblebee pleads for Knockout to let him die to keep Unicron locked away. Knockout would unlock the vault with whatever authorization is needed, and B would be freed. B would be upset, but Knockout would say that it's what Optimus would have done. You could even link it to that strange moment during Knockout and Cyclonus' fight, where Knockout makes a big deal about being honorable, then later Cyclonus says it's dishonorable to kill the Autobots while they're unconscious. Oh no. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the whole honorable thing kind of just comes out of nowhere for Cyclonus, because that whole honorable, like, defeating your enemy when they can't fight back thing, that was a conversation between Knockout and Scourge, not Knockout and Cyclonus. So there's like no through line. Like what the fuck are we even doing here, guys? Come on. So the Destructicons acquire Unicron's spark, decide to spare the Autobots for the sole reason of letting Unicron destroy everything. They leave the Autobots unrestrained, and they make their way to Earth to release him. The fight scene is about 12 minutes long, but it feels way longer. Again, zero momentum. It was also at this point that Slipstream was really starting to piss me off with her cringy, edgy bullshit. It's the same kind of cringe stuff from the 2010s, where they make a character edgy by making them explicitly state that killing and fighting is quote-unquote fun. Kai Lang, is that you? The Earth Autobots make their way to the site of the Combaticons' rampage and see that they destroyed the human base. They confirm what we've already known for a hot minute now, and then remind us of something we've heard at least 2 other times before now. The Combaticons were specifically formed by Megatron himself to defeat the Wreckers. If you know anything about the Combaticons, this is kind of a big deal and breaks the whole plot of the 3 seasons and a movie of Transformers Prime. You'll see soon. Smokescreen and Hot Rod race to meet the Constructicons, while the rest of the crew stay back and realize that it's a trap. RC radios ahead, and then there's this look that Springer gives RC, and Ratchet has figured out how the Covenant of Primus can revive Optimus but can't get a hold of anyone at base, so he decides to move forward. Now, take a good look at this construction site. I'm serious, take a nice long look at it. We are about to spend the next 55 minutes of the runtime here, so get real fucking used to seeing this thing. If you watch this movie, you'll spend so much time here, you'll genuinely start thinking about applying for a mortgage here. All of the Autobots arrive and Hot Rod hits on RC.
Don't worry, I'll protect you.
What the fuck? What am I? What are you doing? Before I can even recover, Onslaught shows up and says this.
What a shame. Such wonderful curves wasted on an Autobot. Be at my side, Autobot, and I will spare your life.
Did Onslaught not only eye fuck RC, but offer her the position of his personal concubine? Who wrote this?
What a pity to waste such a pretty face. But orders are orders.
That's no way to treat a lady, Onslaught.
This is hyper frustrating because the show never emphasized RC's gender, and it most certainly never alluded to any sexual or romantic feelings between any of the Cybertronians. There was a single time where Ratchet essentially catcalls RC when he was hopped up on the aforementioned synthetic energon, but that was the point. Ratchet was behaving out of character due to the drug, and his overconfidence was going to be his downfall in that episode. But this just comes across as the writer/director's barely disguised sexual feelings for RC bleeding into his work, which I personally feel is a very unprofessional thing to do in most cases, especially when this project is supposed to be a continuation of an idea that wasn't created by them. which is why I will say again that fanfiction is more often than not incredibly disrespectful. By the way, unscripted thought. When I say most cases, I mean there are some times where the intent is to sexually arouse in the story one of the characters or make the audience feel uncomfortable. You know, if there is a utility in the story to have sexual arousal be a factor in the story, then that's the only time it's really acceptable. So yeah, let's keep going. The fight starts and it's more of the fight for a few seconds, trash talk and banter repeat loop we saw before. Only prepare to repeat this loop nonstop for nearly 35 minutes. Here's where I'm going to stray away from the blow-by-blow structure and just talk about some of the absolutely bonkers moments that happen in this clusterfuck of a final battle. When Ultra Magnus and the gang on Cybertron come to, they get informed about how the Combaticons were formed to defeat the Wreckers again, as if we didn't already hear this 3 times before. A big problem that the writing has is that the characters will repeat information to each other that we've already heard 2 or 3 times before. Yes, the characters may not have known this information, but it's your job as a writer to get these characters up to speed on information without constantly repeating said information. This was when I noticed that some of the Combaticons have battle masks that look like their faces from Fall of Cybertron, but they open up and reveal a Transformers Prime style face. It's so artistically jarring. It's clear that the Combaticons' designs were inspired by their designs in the Cybertron games, and this epitomizes how the Cybertron games and the Prime TV show are absolutely not connected. Also, a nitpick I have, the show did this very strange thing that the film doesn't do with its exclusive characters. However, it makes sense when you think about it. You may notice that some of the Cybertronian characters have massive eyebrows, namely Starscream, Megatron, and Predaking. This is done to allow the characters who have metal faces and no nose to express emotions effectively without stretching and creasing their faces unnaturally. Even the characters with more proportionate eyebrows have a clear emphasis on them. Then you look at the human characters and see their eyebrows look pretty normal. However, take a look at the Galvatron's revenge characters. Their eyebrows are proportionate like human characters. It makes their faces look tiny like Charlie Kirk's. This is also when the film's quality starts to unravel in ways it did not before. I swear RC's voice actress's mic is getting worse in quality as the film goes on.
It's good to see you again, Fowler. Bulk and Wheeljack are still down.
There are back-to-back scenes where the music will be blaring in one scene then abruptly cut off in the next.
What in Primus are they doing?
We're too late.
And then there are some scenes where the audio mixing is worse than Sonic Adventure 2.
The Covenant of Primus showed me the way.
Optimus Prime, I have brought you back because you embody all that I said for.
There are multiple untextured shots, and I'm pretty sure Rodimus and Springer just lack textures entirely. It's a technical nightmare and dysentery for the eyes and ears. You may have noticed that I have interchangeably used Hot Rod and Rodimus when referring to this character. That's because the film does the exact same thing. For context, Hot Rod is supposed to be his name before he became a Prime, while Rodimus Prime is his full name once he became a Prime. So why is he referred to interchangeably like this? Based on context, I'm guessing Rodimus is his government name, while Hot Rod is the nickname Smokescreen gives him, kind of like how Smokescreen is referred to as Smokey. So let me get this straight. You spent time explaining how triple changers exist now, what the Combaticons were commissioned for multiple times, mind you, why Cybertronian eye colors change, how humans have mixed their technology with Cybertronian tech, and the lore of the anti-primes, but couldn't take 2 seconds to clarify that Hot Rod is his nickname? Then there's this downright hilarious moment where the Cybertron Autobots are finally conscious and are told that they need to get to Earth and stop the Combaticons from combining into Bruticus. So they use the space bridge to get to Earth only for the Combaticons to immediately combine. Mind you, I don't think this was supposed to be intentionally funny, but funny nonetheless. I guess the only compliment I can give this film is that the Bruticus model looks good. It doesn't look like it fits in the Prime continuity, but it looks good. Remember when they mentioned that Megatron formed the Combaticons solely for the purpose of defeating the Wreckers? What am I saying? Of course you do. The movie never shuts up about it. However, now that we know what the Combaticons have up their sleeve, why did Megatron never call these guys to Earth to defeat the Autobots? You'd think Megatron would be like, that motherfucker just cut a mountain in half with the Starsaber. I need the Combaticons here now, Starscream. Ratchet goes to talk to Cybertronian God and asks him to give Optimus back, pretty please with a cherry on top. And Primus says, damn, I wasn't familiar with Unicron's game. I'ma give you Optimus back. Finally, the Destructicons arrive on Earth with Unicron Spark. For some reason, they don't just open the container and release it so it can go back to his body in the core of the planet, but yeah, this is going to be the question that floats over your head for the next half hour. No, wait. The 30 minutes until credits mark isn't until Optimus is revived, my bad. There also seems to be some kind of implied love triangle between RC, Springer, and Rodimus, which feels completely out of place and isn't even remotely developed enough to justify its place in the story. The Autobots want to try and form a truce with Bruticus just for the sake of defeating the Destructicons, but he's big and stupid and only hates them because they're Autobots, despite the fact that the Destructicons keep whooping his ass. Then we get the most contentious inclusion, story-wise, in this film. Optimus is reborn and immediately seeks the self-exiled Megatron's aid in defeating Unicron and his Destructicons. Why? Megatron had a perfectly well-written send-off. Why undo this? And despite Optimus arriving via space bridge, it takes them forever to arrive on Earth to help. While writing this script, it dawned on me. It feels like the writer/director wanted to create his own Dark of the Moon style third act, where half of the film is the third act and is action heavy. But the key difference here is that Dark of the Moon ebbed and flowed. It had a certain motion to it that felt like a roller coaster of buildups, harrowing drops, and stomach dropping zero-G moments. While Galvatron's Revenge just feels like Speaking of Galvatron, for large chunks of the final battle, Galvatron is just fucking missing. You'd think the main antagonist and the namesake of the film would have more of an impact in the final battle. After this one shot of him walking with the spark chamber, the next time we see him, he's put the damn thing down somewhere. And the next time we see the spark chamber, it's left completely unguarded. And all it takes for him to lose it is for Hot Rod to just slide in and grab it straight from his loosely defined grasp. I'm no animation guru, but even I could tell you how to fix this. Rodimus has to be moving faster. Galvatron's got to lean into Hot Rod's direction, then he has to snap back when he loses his grip to show that Rodimus was moving too fast for Galvatron to react adequately enough. Then this next part, I nearly choked to death laughing at this part.
Guys?
What? Was Galvatron even trying, dude? But seriously now, the next 20 minutes are a waste of time. Like, literally nothing fucking happens for 20 minutes. They kind of vaguely swing their fists at each other and threaten/insult each other, pantomiming what a dramatic final battle is supposed to be like. Here's a clip of one of the characters expressing my exact thoughts.
Hey, B, not to sound like I'm complaining, but what's the endgame?
Then Optimus and Megatron arrive and Megatron forgets he disbanded the Decepticons. His arrival is also what causes the Combaticons to actually team up with the Autobots once Megatron orders him to do so. The general concept of a fight continues until, I shit you not, Galvatron just decides to announce that he lost and will be back. Meaning the director decided that the Destructicons lost, which is farcical because they never actually beat them definitively. That's something I try my hardest to avoid in my writing. When someone loses, I want you to know for certain whether it was a win, loss, or draw of sorts. More often than not, when the villain loses, they're a dismembered, broken mess on the floor with all manner of fluids coming out of their face. It's hard to look at someone in that position and say, yeah, he won. Just like it's hard to look at Galvatron and the Destructicons in this film and come away saying, yeah, they lost. For Christ's sake, Galvatron soloed Bruticus. What is blood going on about? He still has Unicron Spark. None of the Destructicons are dead. He only got punched by Optimus and Megatron at the same time when he soloed Bruticus. Motherfucker talking about he lost, man, get your... The movie ends with the Destructicons flying away from Earth, Megatron reforming the Decepticons and declining to fight by Optimus' side to defeat Unicron and the Destructicons, and has the audacity, the fucking gall, to bait a sequel with not only a to-be-continued card, but a fucking post-credit scene where Shockwave and Predaking are working together to create an army of Predacons. I can't. Holy shit, what even was this movie? The entire project was a train wreck that chose to be 45 minutes too long. There was no reason for this film to be nearly 2 hours long when most of it is characters talking at, not to, each other and doing things to each other that I could vaguely describe as quote-unquote fighting. Most of the film's issues are self-inflicted. He got animators who didn't have any experience with fight scenes. He wrote the script and story himself and most likely didn't get anyone to proofread or edit it, which is why we get told multiple times how the Combaticons were designed to defeat the Wreckers. He didn't check to see if the voice actors had acceptable quality microphones, and he didn't get an editor who would edit the thing together in one coherent package. I can tell he didn't because of the way the music randomly cuts off when the film cuts to a new scene. It means that the music is most likely baked into the raw footage by the animators. All of this honestly could have been avoided if the director's eyes matched his stomach. Know what you and your team are capable of instead of shooting for the stars just to not even pass the nearby hill. I honestly feel really bad for the animators because they clearly are trying their best, but just don't have the skill quite yet. There was one animator who worked on the film who explicitly stated as much.
About the delays part, he's not acknowledging the fact that there's stuff with Blender that came up that's just like, I had delays because I didn't know what to do. I was trying to figure them out. And sorry, I didn't meet your expected due date, but I couldn't figure it out. I'm sorry.
Look, I can respect having ambitions and wanting to make a spectacle, but you have to know you and your crew's limits. I get wanting to do big things while not having the means to accomplish it the way you want it to. There's a reason my novel series is a novel series and not a graphic novel series. I can't draw well enough, and I don't have the money to hire someone who can for that many pages. So a novel with character art will have to do for now until I either acquire the skills or the means to hire that talent. It's also quite ironic how the director of the film, Carlos Barrentes, and myself were both inspired by Transformers Prime and other Transformers media, yet we pulled vastly different information from these works. Now, some defenders of the film may say, animation is hard, take it easy on them, they worked really hard on it. And to that I say, so what? Yes, animation is hard, and even attempting to make such an ambitious concept should be commended. But here's the thing, just because you try doesn't mean you get a pass, especially when we compare this film to the last film we'll be covering today. Oh my word. This level of quality should not be available to watch for free on YouTube. EMESIS Blue is a feature-length Team Fortress 2 fan film created in Source Filmmaker, the software used to create those Meet the Team shorts from back in the day. Now, usually Source Filmmaker, or SFM for short, projects tend to have a certain quality to them, a bounce if you will, that gives away the fact that the animation was done in Source Filmmaker. That bounce is almost completely missing from this film. You could have told me this was animated in Blender or Presto or some other non-SFM animator, and I would have believed you. Well, there are a few moments towards the end that, yeah, they aren't great, but when the rest of the film is as good as it is, it's hard to complain about the golden brown cherry pie that has one spot that's a slight shade too dark. EMESIS Blue takes place in the world of Team Fortress 2. The plot revolves around the mystery behind the disappearance of Mayor Jules Archibald. The spy and the soldier are tasked with finding him, while the medic investigates the disappearance of his friend, the scout. As all of the protagonists are led to Conager's slaughterhouse, it's slowly revealed that the rabbit hole goes deep. Way deep. EMESIS Blue is a horror film, but it's not a haunted house kind of horror film where ghosts and ghouls and goblins jump out and scream at you to try and spook you. It's the kind of horror where you're constantly thinking, holy fuck, I would hate to be in this situation. Then you spend a decent amount of time thinking about how you would have possibly done something different from the characters in the film, only to realize that you have no idea if that would have worked because of how many unknowns there were in that situation. EMESIS Blue also has some chilling imagery. Yeah, the Team Fortress 2 characters aren't known for being anything more than silly goober people for the most part, but this film breaks past the stylized art style of TF2 and has some moments that sent shivers down my spine, such as this shot of the soldier looking at something in the darkness. There's also the opening moments of the film where we get some soldiers being respawned out of the respawn machine, and the first two soldiers have the side effects shown. The first one mentions how it feels like eternity in the machine before breaking down, and the second one states that his eyes hurt before we see he is bleeding out of his eyeless eye sockets. But the third one? That moment was the moment I knew I was about to witness something great. This film deserves a full long-form video because it is so fucking good and has so many theories, character moments, and haunting imagery to analyze. Yeah, just add that to the pile of other shit I need to do first. The film also integrates its own lore into the TF2 lore seamlessly. I was under the impression that Jules Archibald, the respawn machines, and the medic's full name in the movie were all lore-accurate aspects. No, they aren't. They were made for this film. That's how you know you've done a good job integrating your story into the lore. It feels like a natural fit. There are a few criticisms I have. Firstly, the film does a good job of using lighting to try and mask the non-TF2 character models so that they don't clash too heavily with the style of the main characters. Then there's a funeral scene at the end of the film and they just give up on doing that? A bit of a spoiler, but you see the owners of the red and blue factions, the Man Brothers, and they're literally just slightly modified versions of the G-Man model from Half-Life Alyx, and they look so out of place. This funeral scene is also where the film feels the most SFM-y. The camera moves in this really strange faux handycam kind of way. The characters, specifically the Man Brothers, start moving in this really weird, bouncy and cartoony way. It doesn't match the energy of the rest of the film's animation and it looks genuinely terrible. But like I said, we're talking about the one slightly darker spot on a gorgeous looking and delicious tasting cherry pie. I can live with that. I've already watched it twice during the production of this video. It's that good. I implore you, please give this a watch before I make a video on this. Even if you don't like horror films, I certainly don't. This film gets my seal of approval. Despite the varying quality, I'm actually quite shocked by the quality of most of the films we've covered today. Some of them are nearly theater-worthy, such as EMESIS Blue and Shadow of the Zone. Spider-Man Lotus is a decent first attempt at a feature-length film that struggles to deliver on what people want from a Spider-Man story. Project Shadow is downright impressive with how VFX heavy it is for a fan project, and Galvatron's Revenge? Well, it has so many weird quirks that you can make a drinking game out of it.